from the National News Studio, Sri Lanka.
Hello there, pleasant evening. You're joining with the National News broadcast. Coming to you live from the National News Studio complex, I'm Lakshmi Singh, and joining me tonight is Kasuni Balachandran.
President says financial assistance extended by the IMF to Ukraine should also be extended to countries affected by food scarcity. Talks between the President and the World Bank President over economic and social issues faced by the country. Central Bank says Sri Lankan economy shows signs of stability in the second half of the year. 5.7 million rupees worth funds defrauded from the Agrahara Insurance Trust Fund. The youth who threw eggs at King Chand arrested. We move on to those and other stories in detail, and in your top local story tonight, President Ranil Wickremesinghe says financial assistance extended by the IMF to Ukraine should also be extended to countries affected by food scarcity under the same terms.
The President made these remarks while addressing the Parliament today after returning from Egypt.
When we went into COP27, there has been no progress made since COP26. In fact, the limit, the target of 1.5 degrees centigrade by 2050 was being raised again, even the developed countries and many countries in the G20. The G20 had not reduced their emissions at all. They have not in any way contributed the $100 billion that they promised. We require $350 billion a year, but we had not even fulfilled that pledge. Now, if you look at the COP27 arrangements, we found that none of the developed countries or the G20 were there to have a serious conversation with the others. Some of the leaders who came only for the opening day, and though they are supposed to have made statements, those statements were not made in the main conference but on sidelines of various events that took place. Of the G20 leaders, the main position was being taken by the President of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa. In that background, we had, I think, Sri Lanka, myself and some of the others, had to condemn and criticize the stand that had been taken. We can't go on like this. There are serious issues that the world faces. If you listen to the speech made by the Secretary General of the UN, I think in the next 20-30 years, the situation becomes more serious. We listened to the Pakistan Prime Minister. We studied the situation where the melting of the Himalayas affected Pakistan, but it's not only that, as Nepal says, it's going to affect them. It's going to affect India. It is going to affect Bangladesh. It is going to affect Myanmar. It's going to affect Maldives. It will go underwater. It's going to affect us. That's the threat that all of us are facing. But there is no response on this by the major countries. Most countries are waiting. So Sri Lanka has to join them. And we must, as far as possible, support it, and if necessary, on some occasions, take the leadership. The second is the food security. We have gone through a problematic case. I must thank the country that helped us. We won't have a major issue of food security next year, hopefully. But Africa is pretty bad. 20 to 30 million people will be affected. There will be a large number of deaths on the Horn of Africa. There is no aid or assistance. It was not discussed. Now, in addition to the fact some of them can't grow food, others can't get fertilizer to grow food. They haven't the money. So we have to help them. Secondly is that they are affected especially by the fact that most of them are in debt. So in my view, we should give to those countries that are having serious problems on food scarcity the same terms that the IMF gave to Ukraine. Ukraine was fighting a war with Russia. These people are fighting a war for survival. So these are major issues which will be a part of our foreign policy and our environment policy in the coming area. I was very happy when the chief whip of the opposition referred to Geneva, because I think this is the very basic right, the right to live of this generation, the younger people, those who will be 40, 50 in 2050, whom we are talking, and the unborn. So if you are going to ignore the rights of the youth, the younger generation, and of the unborn, that is the worst genocide that can happen. So we hope in time to come, while they are addressing issues concerning Sri Lanka, that they'll also be in a position to address this whole issue of what I call genocide into genocide into genocide, and we should raise that up.
World Bank Group President David Malpass met with President Ranil Wickremesinghe recently in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, on the sidelines of the COP27 climate change conference.
Both leaders discussed the challenging macroeconomic and social situation in Sri Lanka and the urgent need to stabilize the economy. President Malpass emphasized the importance of timely and effective resolution of the ongoing debt crisis and encouraged President Wickremesinghe to continue engaging with Sri Lanka's official bilateral and private sector creditors to promptly agree on debt restructuring. President Malpass and President Wickremesinghe discussed ways to improve the efficiency of public expenditure and necessary reforms to the state-owned enterprises, particularly given the large size of the public sector in Sri Lanka. President Malpass affirmed the World Bank Group's support to the Sri Lankan people in rebuilding their economy and creating a foundation for sustainable private sector-led growth through IDA, concessional financing, technical assistance and policy advice. President Malpass and President Wickremesinghe discussed opportunities for improving agriculture production and value chains through effective programs supporting fertilizer use, as well as Sri Lanka's large potential in the service sector, including tourism and education. President Malpass and President Wickremesinghe also spoke about climate change and the financing needs of developing countries to pursue impactful adaptation and mitigation investment.
The Central Bank of Sri Lanka says that the Sri Lankan economy has shown signs of stability in the second half of the year so far. The respective stability has been assisted by the myriad of multifaceted policy interventions undertaken to steer the economy to transition towards a path of stable and sustainable growth over the medium term. The central bank made these observations in a report titled Recent Economic Developments, Highlights of 2022 and Prospects for 2023, published today. With the intention of helping the economy to transit to a stable and more sustainable footing, the government initiated a reform program through the introduction of a slew of measures to increase both tax and non-tax revenue, while continuing its drive to further rationalize expenditure through the curtailment of non-agent capital expenditure and recurrent expenditure. Tourism earnings recorded some turnaround, while workers' remittances remained subdued despite recording some revival in recent months. The engagement with the IMF on a macroeconomic adjustment program progressed on many fronts, with a staff-level agreement for an extended fund facility being reached in early September 2022. The debt restructuring process has also reached an advanced stage. The economy is expected to transit onto the path of recovery from the latter part of 2023 in consideration to the progress that has been made thus far in relation to the IMF EFF program and debt restructuring negotiations, the reforms that have already been undertaken and those that are to be implemented in the period ahead.
Minister Harin Fernando took part in an exclusive interview with the CNN network to discuss regarding the progress of Sri Lanka tourism. He made remarks over the mechanisms in place to resolve the prevailing crisis situation in the country through the tourism sector.
I had Harin Fernando, the Sri Lankan tourism minister, with me. You got a hard job, sir.
Well, it's not as hard as I thought. Things are turning out to be very good because Sri Lankans are a resilient nation. They're working very hard. The last 3 months we have gotten over the queues, we've gotten back normal tourism to come back. Most of the air seat capacities are opening up. Flights are doubling, tripling from Emirates and Qatar. These are main two airlines that comes into Sri Lanka. Swiss Air just started on the 10th, KLM, Air France, all flying into Sri Lanka.
But it is fascinating that because the scenes we saw earlier were dramatic, but the country has bounced back.
Well, as I said, Sri Lankans, that's Sri Lankans for you. You know, we're quite,
smile.
We're quite resilient. We're just always positive people. I think they call us the positive police all the time. So we do it right. I mean, we go through a lot of issues, but Sri Lanka as a nation is always comes back stronger. So that's what I've realized within 3 months. I myself was on the protest before, and I joined this government just because country came first for me.
Is that poacher turned gamekeeper?
something like that, I would say. No, but to be
so now you've got the job of, Sri Lanka is one of those tourism industry or bureaus that's very respected, extremely experienced. You have a mature or not huge tourism market for long-haul destinations, a luxury end side. How are you going to rebuild that and the confidence of it?
We'll see. The industry is stronger. The hoteliers, the travel agents are quite there for some long times and long histories with them. So for them, they've gone through Sri Lanka, have gone through a 30-year civil war, they've bounced back. They keep going back and forth, back and forth. But it was unfortunate, a series of efforts, like you said, from 2019, come 2018 was our best year, and then comes 2019, the Easter bombing. From there on was the pandemic, then the political and the financial crisis. But right now what we see is Sri Lanka, if we are to come out of this, tourism is one industry that Sri Lanka really needs to put our hands up and really perform at this moment. It is a task, but look around the world. Everywhere you see issues, everywhere is a mess. So I think Sri Lankans, even though we're in a mess, we look a little bit better because we have a very good product to sell. Sri Lanka, as a product, has something for everyone in Sri Lanka.
COPE committee has instructed authorities to implement 8 recommendations presented by the Auditor General regarding the purchasing of coal for the period of 2022 to 2025.
The relevant decision was reached when the COPE committee convened at the Parliament yesterday to inquire into the special audit report presented on the 30th of September. Secretary to the Power and Energy, Chairman of the Procurement Committee, Chairman of Sri Lanka Coal Limited and Chairman of Technological Assessment Committee was summoned for the meeting. The COPE committee meeting was chaired by parliamentarian Professor Ranjit Bandara yesterday. The COPE committee discussed over a special situation arose when tenders were called for the purchasing of coal. The committee directed their attention on the remarks made by the officials summoned for the meeting. The Auditor General in his report has lengthily briefed on the shortcomings pertaining to the procurement procedure during this process. The members of the COPE agreed to submit a complete report over the discussed issues and facts to Parliament. Also, the COPE committee issued an order to the authorities to implement the recommendations as mentioned in the Auditor General's report, considering the details indicated over the legal agreements. Now, Colombo Fraud Investigation Bureau has arrested an assistant manager working for the National Insurance Trust Fund who has allegedly defrauded 5.7 million rupees by crediting the funds into personal accounts.
The suspect was produced before Colombo Fort Magistrate yesterday and will be in remand custody until the 23rd of November. The complaint was lodged by the Human Resources Manager of the National Insurance Trust Fund, also known as the Agrahara Insurance Fund, with the Colombo Fraud Investigation Bureau on the 28th of September. Following an investigation, the assistant manager was taken into custody over the incident. The suspect is a 33-year-old resident of Bandaragama. Investigations have revealed that the suspect had prepared fake documents and credited the funds worth 5,746,541 rupees to 5 bank accounts of her relatives. The police has indicated that the investigations related to the suspect will be conducted under the Public Property Act. The United States has imposed sanctions on Sri Lanka-based businessmen after being identified as a business associate of a sanctioned Al-Qaeda financial facilitator and external operations plotter. The U.S. Department of the Treasury, in an announcement, issued the sanctions against the Sri Lankan businessman.
The U.S. Department of the Treasury said that Mohammed Nizar is accused of having conducted business activities to assist Al-Qaeda financial facilitator Ahmed Lukman Talib, along with Muzab Turkman, a Turkey-based businessman. The U.S. Department of the Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control previously designated Talib for facilitating the international movement of individuals and finances in furtherance of Al-Qaeda's objectives. In a statement, the U.S. Department of the Treasury said Mohammed Irshad Mohammed Hariz Nizar, also known as Nizar, is a Sri Lanka-based business partner of Talib. As of mid-2018, Talib and Nizar were joint representatives of the same business, and Nizar has been Talib's business partner in Sri Lanka since at least late 2018. Nizar is being designated pursuant for having materially assisted, sponsored or provided financial, material or technological support for all goods or services to or in support of Talib, it added.
Speaker Mahinda Yapapewardena says the Supreme Court of Sri Lanka has determined that the value-added tax amendment bill is inconsistent with the constitution. The Speaker, addressing the Parliament today, said that the bill could be moved with the required amendments.
Being moved at the committee stage of Parliament as proposed by the learned Deputy Solicitor General, the bill as a whole is not inconsistent with the provisions of the Constitution. Number 1, clause 3, the insertion of following proviso in section 10(1) within inverted commas provided further for the purpose of paragraph requirement
State Minister Ranjit Siyambalapitiya says the government will present a budget primarily based on welfare. The State Minister made these remarks during a media briefing held at the Finance Ministry today. The economic growth rate of the country for the upcoming year has been forecasted at -3%. State Minister Ranjit Siyambalapitiya said that presenting a budget consists of proposals to stabilize the country amidst such economic backdrop is a challenging task. State Minister Siyambalapitiya further indicated that the economic foundation of the country during this year has been negative and the state income should be primarily formulated with taxations. He pointed out that the Finance Minister will face the challenge in the guise of responsibility to determine how to address the gap between state income and expenditure and the revival of the economic and political spheres of the country in year 2023. He added that the government expects a new beginning in the year 2023 with the intention to ensure the livelihood of the people through the budget.
President Ranil Wickremesinghe says the IMF has requested not to release the agreement reached between Sri Lanka and the lending agency until the current round of negotiations are complete. Addressing the Parliament today, the President promised to inform the Parliament on the IMF agreement as soon as the negotiation process concludes.
Two,
the Committee on Public Accounts has disclosed that there is no proper regulatory system to control the price of vegetable seeds in the country. This was disclosed when COPA met in Parliament recently under the chairmanship of MP Kabir Hashim. It was also discussed that although the state policy on seed and planting material industry was prepared in 1997, it was not published in the Gazette as of January 1st, 2021. It was disclosed that there are several institutions in the private sector that are allowed to import seeds and that this act does not include a system to control the price of seeds imported by those institutions. The members of Parliament pointed out that the domestic vegetable farmer is in a lot of trouble as a result of that, and this is a mafia. Therefore, they pointed out that a system should be prepared to control this situation, and by that a system should be created to enable the domestic vegetable farmer to buy vegetable seeds at an affordable price. COPA committee also pointed out that the percentage of providing locally produced vegetable seeds to the domestic vegetable farmer is not satisfactory.
Minister Prasanna Ranatunga says the state officials are hesitant to adjust from the methods and practices they are accustomed for many years.
Therefore, he said that the majority of the officials emphasize more on the unachievable rather than making positive observations in fulfilling their duties. The minister made these remarks during a ceremony held in Battaramulla with the participation of Prime Minister Dinesh Gunawardena. The event held at the Urban Development Authority premises was organized to introduce an online services unit of the authority. Accordingly, this service consists of information of 26 institutions. The relevant unit has been established to provide services efficiently for both local and foreign investors. Information can be obtained by accessing www.osu.uda.lk. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Dinesh Gunawardena engaged in an observational visit to a home gardening program today.
According to data issued by the World Health Organization, 97% of the persons infected with monkeypox are male. Specialist Dr. Chintana Pereira said that only 31 patients have been detected from South Asia thus far. During a media briefing held today, the Government Medical Officers Association indicated that the surveillance system at airports should be further strengthened. The association also pointed out the need to increase the efficiency of tests and facilities in identifying monkeypox-infected patients. Dr. Chintana Pereira said that 96.9% of the monkeypox infections have been identified as male, while 3% are female. He said that 80% of the males are in the age group of 18 to 44 years. He said that the public should not fear unnecessarily over the spread of the disease, as the infection is not as critical as COVID-19. A series of protests organized by inter-university students federation held in several parts of the country yesterday. The protests were organized with the demands to stop the repressive actions and the release of convener of Inter-University Bhikkhu Federation, Venerable Galvava Siridhammathera, and convener of Inter-University Students Federation, Vasantha Mudalige. Meanwhile, a commemoration marking the 7th-month anniversary of the Galle Face protest was organized near the Galle Face Green yesterday.
President Ranil Wickremesinghe says the IMF has requested not to release the agreement reached between Sri Lanka and the lending agency until the current round of negotiations are complete. Addressing the Parliament today, the President promised to inform the Parliament on the IMF agreement as soon as the negotiation process concludes.
Types of development needed approval.
Stay tuned with us. News from overseas coming your way after this short break.
Prima Kottumi Hot and Spicy Cricket KTM Delivery Sashi Packet Ilakam 2343 SMS செய்யுங்கள் தினம்தோறும் 2,50,000 ரூபாய் பண பரிசுகள் மேலும் பெறுமதியான பரிசுகள் நவம்பர் 30 வரை மட்டுமே.
Prima Kottumi Fun Tamai.
Welcome back, and in your foreign news tonight, control of the Senate and House in the United States is still in the balance as the attention has been now directed on undecided Arizona and Nevada Senate races. While the overall midterm election results may not be known for hours or even days, candidates from both parties are already celebrating historic victories. Votes are still being counted in the U.S. midterms, and the result will decide the balance of power for the next 2 years of President Biden's presidency. Republicans look set to take the House of Representatives, the lower chamber of Congress, but control of the Senate is still too close to call. Reports have indicated that whichever party wins, 2 of the 3 outstanding contests in Arizona, Georgia and Nevada are expected to gain control of the Senate. The race in Georgia, meanwhile, will not be decided until a runoff election on the 6th of December. President Biden, in a statement, indicated that he is relieved that the Democratic Party performed better than expected and said a giant red wave did not happen as had been predicted. In the meantime, former President Donald Trump, who is expected to announce a presidential bid, has admitted the midterm results were somewhat disappointing. A man has been arrested after eggs were thrown at the king and queen consort during a visit to York. A protester was restrained by police as crowds gathered at Maclegate Bar, the traditional royal entrance into the city, to greet the couple.
A 23-year-old was heard to shout, quote, "This country was built on the blood of slaves," unquote, as he was restrained. The man, a University of York student, was held on suspicion of a public order offence and remains in custody. People in the crowd started chanting, quote, "God save the king," and, quote, "Shame on you," at the demonstrator. The incident occurred on the second day of an official royal visit to Yorkshire, during which the king and queen consort later travelled to Doncaster.
Nurses belonging to the Royal College of Nursing Union have voted to strike. Action is expected before the end of the year and would be the union's first UK-wide strike in its 106-year history. The walkout will involve Royal College of Nursing Union members in more than half of hospitals and community teams, but emergency care will be protected. The strike ballot was sent to 300,000 Royal College of Nursing members, representing around two-thirds of the nurse workforce. However, instead of one national ballot, a series of mini ballots were held across local services.
Florida is bracing for a rare November hurricane as Nicole churns off the state's Atlantic coast. The Category 1 hurricane has lashed Grand Bahama Island and is forecast to hit Florida overnight. Hurricane Nicole has already grounded flights and shut theme parks and schools in the state ahead of its projected landfall. Since record-keeping began in 1853, Florida had only 2 hurricane strikes in November, in 1935 and 1985. Nicole would be the first hurricane to make landfall in the U.S. this late in the season in 40 years. The storm is expected to hit southeastern or east-central Florida coast.
Even as far south as Miami and Broward.
You know you, and you know your place where you live and where you take refuge.
This historically rare event ready to potentially wreak havoc on a state still in recovery mode. Sam Brock and
Prima Stella Set Yogurt.
ජය ගන්න වැඩි වෙන්න.
And in sports news, England clinched victory over India and qualified for the World T20 final round today.
The second semi-finals of the World Cup between England and India was held in Adelaide. Winning the toss, England opted to field first. Accordingly, Indian batsmen were only able to gather 168 runs for the loss of 6 wickets in their innings. Virat Kohli scored 50 runs while Hardik Pandya scored 63. Chasing a target of 169, English openers captain Jos Buttler and Alex Hales showcased a brilliant batting performance and by putting up a strong partnership managed to achieve the target, securing a wicketless win for England. Jos Buttler scored 80 while Alex Hales scored 86. Accordingly, the finals of the T20 World Cup will be between Pakistan and England on coming Sunday. The match will be played at Melbourne Cricket Ground.
Only 10 days are left for the FIFA World Cup, which commences on the 20th of this month. The official broadcaster of the World Football Championship is the national television.
Stadium 974 is a football stadium in Ras Abu Abu, the Doha, Qatar, and a temporary venue made from 974 recycled shipping containers that will host matches during the 2022 FIFA World Cup. The stadium is constructed on a 450,000 square meter waterfront site and is situated on an artificial promontory. The stadium is one of the 8 being converted for the FIFA World Cup in Qatar 2022. The stadium received a 4-star rating from the Global Sustainability Assessment System.
Prima Stella Set Yogurt.
ජයගන්න වැඩි වෙන්න.
And with that, we'll wrap up tonight's bulletin. Do join us tomorrow for more of the very latest.